Rolls-Royce has committed to manufacturing Gripen engines in Canada. And there's one particular detail that's shaking up Canada's aviation industry.
Canada is making a high-stakes move that has the Pentagon on edge. By seizing complete domestic control over Rolls-Royce engine maintenance, they aren't just boosting their economy, they are rewriting the rules of North American defense. Is the US about to lose its strategic grip over its closest allies' air power? Hidden within the blueprints of Canada's new aerospace plan lies a detail that keeps American military planners up at night. This isn't just about repairing engines, it's a bid for total sovereign autonomy that threatens to shut the US out of the loop. Why is the Pentagon so terrified of a Canadian engine shop? You probably think the US and Canada share everything when it comes to defense, but that's about to change. Canada's push for independent Rolls-Royce maintenance is a direct challenge to American military hegemony. We're diving into the secret tensions and the massive shift in power happening right now across the border.
For decades, Canada's high-performance turbine engines, including those powered by Rolls-Royce platforms, did not truly belong to Canada in operational terms. On paper, yes. In practice, not entirely. Because when it came time for deep maintenance, core overhauls, or turbine rebuild cycles, those engines didn't stay in Canada. They moved south. For years, Canadian air fleets relied heavily on US-based overhaul depots, facilities embedded inside the American defense industrial ecosystem. That arrangement was never presented as a vulnerability. It was framed as efficiency, shared infrastructure, allied integration, cost optimization. And in peacetime, it worked. But here's what rarely makes headlines. Engine overhaul capacity is not infinite. American depots prioritize American readiness first. They always have. During surge periods, whether driven by global deployments, crisis rotations, or increased training tempo, backlog builds, slots tighten, turnaround timelines stretch. And when that happens, smaller partners wait. That bottleneck effect isn't theoretical. It directly impacts sortie generation rates. It limits fleet availability. It compresses training windows. For a country like Canada, responsible for vast Arctic patrol zones, NORAD commitments, and NATO obligations, even minor maintenance delays compound into strategic friction. This is where the shift begins. Ottawa's realization was not dramatic. It was gradual, data-driven, quiet. If your engines must leave the country for lifecycle overhauls, if your readiness depends on foreign facility availability, if surge access requires diplomatic alignment, then sovereignty has a ceiling. That's the uncomfortable conclusion.
Modern air power isn't just about who builds the aircraft. It's about who controls the sustainment chain, who owns the tooling, who certifies the rebuilds, who decides priority order in a crisis. And for years, that priority order wasn't written in Ottawa. It was written in Washington. The Pentagon understands something most headlines ignore. Maintenance autonomy isn't symbolic, it's structural power. If Canada builds a domestic Rolls-Royce maintenance ecosystem, certified, industrialized, and independent, it removes a layer of logistical leverage that has existed quietly for decades. This isn't anti-American, it's anti-dependency. There's a difference. From my perspective, this is the moment Canada's defense establishment finally internalized a hard lesson of modern alliance politics. Integration without redundancy creates vulnerability. The Pentagon doesn't fear Canada's engines, it fears the precedent. Because once sustainment decentralizes, influence decentralizes with it. And that's where this story gets bigger than turbines.
If the first phase was realization, this phase is execution. Canada's response hasn't been rhetorical, it has been financial. Quietly, billions are being redirected into high-tech propulsion infrastructure inside the Montreal Aerospace corridor, a region already dense with advanced manufacturing, composite engineering, avionics integration, and turbine research capacity. This isn't symbolic investment. We're talking about next-generation diagnostic systems, digital twin engine modeling, advanced metallurgy labs, hot section refurbishment capabilities, and certified overhaul bays designed to handle complex Rolls-Royce turbine platforms domestically. For decades, Canada was part of the aerospace supply chain. Now it wants to control the sustainment chain, and that is a very different level of power.
What makes this pivot even more significant is how it's being structured. Ottawa isn't simply expanding capacity and asking Washington for approval. Instead, it's building direct strategic partnerships with Rolls-Royce, aligning with the manufacturer itself rather than routing every major sustainment step through traditional U.S. Department of Defense gatekeeping mechanisms. That subtle shift matters because historically, deep maintenance certification, tooling approvals, parts authorization, and lifecycle data access often flowed through American defense channels, even when allied nations operated the same engines. If Canada can secure direct OEM integration, it reduces procedural dependency on U.S. procurement pipelines. That doesn't break alliances, but it reshapes them. Economically, the implications are just as significant. Every engine overhaul sent south represented millions in labor, tooling, inspection, and certification costs leaving the Canadian economy. Over a 30 to 40-year life cycle, those flows compound into billions. Now imagine reversing that current. Instead of exporting sustainment dollars, Canada internalizes them, creating high-skill aerospace jobs, stabilizing domestic suppliers, strengthening metallurgical research hubs, and anchoring long-term industrial resilience. This isn't a one-contract decision. It's a generational industrial policy shift. From my perspective, this is where Washington's unease becomes understandable, because defense logistics are influence networks. When sustainment runs through American facilities, American institutions sit at the center of the ecosystem. When sustainment decentralizes, that centrality weakens. Canada's move doesn't challenge U.S. military dominance, but it does quietly reduce U.S. industrial leverage. And in defense politics, leverage is everything. The Pentagon may publicly frame this as routine industrial diversification. Privately, they understand what it signals. Canada is preparing for a future where alliance cooperation exists, but dependency does not. And that distinction changes the balance inside NATO more than most people realize.
Washington's concern isn't about Canada repairing engines. It's about control over the system that surrounds those engines. For decades, NATO's high-end logistics architecture has been centralized. Deep maintenance, certification pathways, software validation, lifecycle analytics, much of it has flowed through US-anchored infrastructure. That structure doesn't just ensure interoperability, it reinforces hierarchy. When sustainment flows through American hubs, command influence flows with it. An independent Canadian maintenance ecosystem disrupts that flow. From the Pentagon's perspective, decentralized hubs weaken the centralized NATO supply spine. If Canada can fully overhaul Rolls-Royce turbines domestically with OEM-certified capability, then sustainment priority, turnaround cycles, and readiness rates no longer depend on U.S. facility availability. That reduces leverage. The bigger concern is precedent. If Canada proves autonomy works without breaking interoperability, other mid-tier NATO states may replicate the model. Norway, the Netherlands, possibly others. Not to exit NATO, but to rebalance internal dependence. That would gradually dilute the US-centric sustainment hierarchy. Then there's the black box issue. Modern engines are data systems. They generate performance analytics, wear cycle modeling, predictive maintenance algorithms, software configurations. Historically, access to certain layers of this ecosystem intersected with US-managed sustainment pipelines. If Canada gains direct proprietary data integration with Rolls-Royce without US-mediated filtering, it changes informational dynamics. Who holds the diagnostic keys? Who validates firmware updates? Who controls configuration authority? When those answers shift away from Washington, influence narrows. This isn't about mistrust, it's about structural positioning. Integrated command systems rely on central nodes. Canada building a parallel node introduces redundancy, and redundancy reduces dependency. And in alliance politics, reduced dependency means reduced leverage. That's the core of the anxiety.
This isn't just an industrial story, it's a leverage story. If Canada controls its own Rolls-Royce engine sustainment chain, it controls readiness speed. And in Arctic and NORAD operations, readiness is influence. When overhaul timelines are domestic, Ottawa no longer negotiates from dependency. It shows up to Arctic modernization talks and continental defense planning with independent operational capacity, not outsourced sustainment risk. That subtly shifts bargaining power. Maintenance speed also becomes a diplomatic asset. If Canada builds certified high-end propulsion facilities, it can offer overhaul services to European operators running similar engine platforms. faster turnaround, neutral geography, no US backlog exposure. That creates an alternative node inside the NATO ecosystem. Not anti-American, but not American-controlled either. And that's strategically significant, because once European allies have options, supply hierarchy becomes competitive rather than centralized. The final shift is psychological. For decades, Canada has operated as a highly integrated but structurally junior defense partner in North America. Capable, trusted, but rarely central to technological gatekeeping. Domestic engine mastery changes that perception. If Canada controls Arctic-capable sustainment infrastructure, owns critical propulsion tooling, and manages proprietary engine analytics inside its borders, it transitions from participant to gatekeeper. In the North, sustainment equals sovereignty, and sovereignty backed by industrial capability changes how partners and rivals calculate influence. That's the real pivot.
Propulsion autonomy doesn't end with maintenance, it shapes procurement. If Canada proves it can sustain advanced Rolls-Royce engines independently, future fighter and transport acquisitions will be evaluated differently. Sustainment sovereignty becomes a selection criterion, not just performance specs. The next generation fleet won't just be judged on stealth, payload, or range. It will be judged on, can Canada control the lifecycle? Can it access the data? Can it upgrade without foreign bottlenecks? That changes vendor negotiations permanently. Zoom out, and this isn't isolated to Canada. There's a broader global shift underway, quiet de-Americanization in defense logistics. Not rejection of the US, but diversification away from single-node dependency. Europe is investing in domestic production lines. Asian allies are expanding sovereign sustainment. Middle powers are demanding direct OEM access. The era of automatic logistical centralization is under pressure. Canada's propulsion pivot fits directly into that trend. And if this maintenance plan succeeds, meaning faster turnaround, certified domestic overhauls, independent data integration, it forces a structural rethink of the Canada-US defense relationship going into the 2030s. The alliance won't weaken, but the balance inside it will adjust. Because partnerships based on integration are stable, partnerships based on dependency are fragile. Canada appears to be choosing integration without dependency. That's a long-term strategic recalibration.